Life was good for him, really good, the kind of good that made him thank God every morning when he woke up. He was 34 years old, running his own architecture firm, and things were finally falling into place after years of hard work. His office was doing well, clients were happy, and money wasn't tight anymore like it used to be in the early days. But more than anything, he had his family, his wife of 8 years, the girl he fell in love with back in college. She was his first real girlfriend, his best friend, and the mother of his 2 beautiful daughters. The older one was 6, full of questions about everything, always drawing pictures and making up stories. The younger one was 4, still learning to tie her shoes, but already showing signs of being just as bright as her sister. Every morning started the same way. Coffee together in the kitchen while the girls were still sleeping. Those quiet 15 minutes before the chaos of getting everyone ready for school. They'd talk about the day ahead, what needed to be done, who was picking up the kids. Simple stuff. Normal stuff. The kind of routine that felt comfortable, like an old pair of shoes. He'd drop the girls at school on his way to the office. They'd kiss him goodbye and run off to join their friends, and he'd sit in his car for just a minute, watching them go, feeling grateful for what he had. Then it was off to work, spending hours on building designs, meeting with clients, managing his small team. He loved his work, always had, creating something from nothing, seeing his drawings turn into actual buildings that people would use for years to come. Evenings were family time, dinner around the table, everyone sharing about their day. Bath time for the girls, then bedtime stories. He'd do different voices for the characters, making his daughters giggle. His wife would stand in the doorway sometimes, smiling at them. After the kids were asleep, they'd usually watch some TV together, maybe talk about weekend plans, then head to bed themselves. It was a good life, a blessed life. He knew plenty of guys from college whose marriages had fallen apart, who barely saw their kids, who were stressed about money or jobs. He wasn't like that. He had it all figured out. Or at least that's what he thought. Looking back now, he can pinpoint when things started feeling different. Small things at first. The kind of things you notice but don't really pay attention to because they seem meaningless. His wife started spending more time on her phone. Not in an obvious way, but he'd catch her smiling at the screen sometimes, then quickly putting it down when he walked into the room. She joined a yoga class, 3 times a week, evening sessions. He thought it was great, actually. She'd been saying for months that she needed to do something for herself, get out of the house more, get some exercise. He encouraged it, told her she deserved time for her own hobbies and interests. Then she started dressing differently. Not dramatically, but he noticed she was putting more effort into her appearance on days she didn't even leave the house. New perfume, hair done nicely on a random Tuesday afternoon. When he mentioned it, she'd just say she felt like making an effort, that being a mom didn't mean she had to look tired all the time. He pushed away the little voice in his head that whispered something wasn't right. He trusted her completely. They'd been together for over a decade. They had 2 kids together. They'd built this whole life together. She would never do anything to risk that. He was just being paranoid, he told himself. Marriage changes over the years. People need their own space, their own interests. It's healthy. His friends would sometimes joke about their wives acting strange, hiding their phones, going out more. They'd laugh about it over beers, making comments about how you never really know what's going on. He'd always felt a bit superior during those conversations, like his marriage was different, stronger, more honest. The thing about trust is that it makes you blind. When you truly believe in someone, you can explain away almost anything. Working late becomes just work. New clothes become just wanting to feel good. Distraction becomes just being tired. You create stories in your head that make sense because the alternative is too frightening to consider. He remembers one evening about 3 weeks before everything fell apart, when his wife seemed distant during dinner. The girls were chattering away about their day at school, but she was somewhere else mentally, pushing food around her plate. He asked if she was okay. She said she was fine, just tired. He accepted that answer because accepting it was easier than digging deeper. That night, after the kids were asleep, he tried to be close to her. Not in a physical way, just emotionally. asking about her day, about how the yoga was going, about what she'd been thinking about lately. She gave short answers, said everything was fine, then made an excuse about being exhausted and went to bed early. He stayed up, sitting in the living room in the dark, feeling something he couldn't quite name, not suspicion exactly, more like a sense that something in their world had shifted slightly, like a picture frame that's just a tiny bit crooked. You might not notice it at first, but once you do, you can't stop seeing it. The hardest part about looking back is seeing all the signs he missed, or maybe didn't miss but chose to ignore. Because acknowledging them would have meant facing a possibility he wasn't ready to face. It would have meant asking questions he wasn't ready to hear answers to. It would have meant disturbing the peace of his perfect life. He kept going to work every day, kept dropping off the kids, kept having dinner with his family, kept reading bedtime stories. But something had changed in him. He found himself watching his wife more closely, noticing when she smiled at her phone, paying attention to when she left for yoga and when she came back, listening to the tone in her voice when she talked about her day. And the more he watched, the more uncertain he became. Not because he caught her doing anything wrong, but because the woman he'd been married to for 8 years suddenly felt like someone he didn't quite know anymore. There was a lightness about her sometimes, a kind of happiness that seemed to come from somewhere outside their home, outside their family. But he said nothing. He asked nothing. He just watched and wondered and hoped that he was wrong about the growing feeling in his gut that something was very, very wrong with his perfect life. Their anniversary was coming up. 8 years of marriage. He wanted to do something special, something to remind both of them of why they'd chosen each other in the first place. Maybe he was sensing the distance between them, or maybe he just wanted to celebrate what they'd built together. Either way, he planned everything carefully. He made reservations at the same restaurant where he'd proposed to her all those years ago. He remembered that night so clearly, how nervous he'd been, how beautiful she'd looked, how she'd cried happy tears when he got down on one knee. They'd been so young then, so full of dreams and plans for the future. He bought her a pearl necklace. She'd always loved pearls, said they were elegant and timeless. He'd seen her looking at necklaces online a few months back, so he went to the jewelry store and picked out the nicest one he could afford. It wasn't cheap, but she was worth it. She was worth everything to him. He arranged for his mother to watch the girls for the evening. His mom was thrilled, loved spending time with her granddaughters. He told her it was a surprise anniversary, dinner, and she gave him that knowing smile that mothers give, happy to see her son taking care of his marriage. The day of their anniversary, he left work early, stopped by a flower shop and picked up her favorite roses, the pale pink ones she'd carried in their wedding. He was actually excited, feeling like maybe this dinner would help bring them closer again, bridge whatever gap had formed between them. He got home around 4 in the afternoon, much earlier than usual. His car was quiet in the driveway. The house looked peaceful from the outside, with the afternoon sun hitting the windows just right. He grabbed the flowers from the passenger seat, thinking about how surprised she'd be. The front door was unlocked. He walked in, calling out to let her know he was home. No answer. He figured maybe she was upstairs, maybe in the shower or getting dressed. He put the flowers in the kitchen, filled a vase with water, arranged them nicely on the counter. Then he went upstairs to find her. She was sitting on the edge of their bed, not doing anything, just sitting there. And she was crying. Not loud sobbing, but quiet tears running down her face, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep inside. His first thought was that something terrible had happened, an accident, bad news, someone hurt or sick. He rushed over to her, asking what was wrong, if everyone was okay, if the girls were safe. She looked up at him with red eyes and said 4 words that made his stomach drop. "We need to talk." Nobody ever says those words before sharing good news. He sat down next to her on the bed, this bed they'd shared for 8 years, where they'd laughed and fought and held each other through good times and bad. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. She started crying harder, struggling to get the words out. And then she said it. She'd kissed someone, another man, someone from her yoga class. His name was David. The room seemed to tilt. He felt like he couldn't breathe right, like the air had gotten too thick. He just stared at her, waiting for her to say she was joking, that this was some kind of weird test or misunderstanding. But she kept crying, kept talking through her tears. "It was just a kiss," she kept saying, over and over. "Just one kiss." I stopped it. I realized what I was doing and I stopped it immediately. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, just a kiss." Those words echoed in his head. Just a kiss. Like it was nothing. Like she'd just bumped into someone accidentally, or spilled coffee on a shirt. Just a kiss. But he needed to know more. He needed to understand. His voice came out strange, like it belonged to someone else, asking questions he never thought he'd have to ask his wife. How long had she known this person? 2 months, she said. They'd been having coffee together after yoga class. Just talking, she insisted. Nothing physical except for that one kiss. When did it happen? 3 weeks ago, she admitted. 3 weeks. She'd been carrying this secret for 3 weeks, sleeping next to him every night, kissing him goodbye every morning, living in their house with their children, all while hiding this massive thing. Had they been texting? Yes, she whispered. Every day, throughout the day. He'd send her good morning messages. They'd talk about books, movies, life. Just friendly conversation, she said. But her face told him she knew it had been more than that. He asked to see her phone. She handed it over without argument. She'd already deleted everything, she said. Blocked his number, deleted all their messages, cut off all contact. It was over before it really began, she promised. He scrolled through, her phone anyway, seeing the absence of evidence rather than evidence itself, empty spaces where conversations had been, a blocked contact list with a name he didn't recognize. It somehow made it worse, seeing the ghost of what had happened. She reached for his hand. He pulled away. The movement was instinctive, automatic. He couldn't bear the thought of her touching him right then. The same hands that had held someone else. The same lips that had kissed another man. It didn't mean anything, she said desperately. It was a mistake, a huge mistake. I love you. I love our family. I don't want to lose you. Please, you have to believe me. It meant nothing. But if it meant nothing, why did it happen at all? If it meant nothing, why had she been having secret coffee dates and daily text conversations with this person for 2 months? If it meant nothing, why did his entire world feel like it was crumbling around him? He stood up from the bed. He couldn't sit next to her anymore. Couldn't look at her face, all red and tear-stained, looking for forgiveness he didn't know if he could give. The anniversary dinner suddenly seemed like a sick joke. The flowers downstairs, the pearl necklace in his jacket pocket, the reservation at the restaurant where he'd promised to love her forever. He told her he couldn't do this right now, couldn't talk, couldn't think, couldn't process. He needed space. She nodded, crying harder, saying she understood, that she deserved this, that she'd give him whatever time he needed. He walked out of their bedroom and into the guest room down the hall. They'd decorated it nicely for when his parents or her family visited. He'd never imagined he'd be sleeping there himself, hiding from his own wife in his own house. That night, he lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how his perfect life had fallen apart in the space of a single conversation. The next few days felt like walking through fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real. He still had to get up every morning, still had to take care of the girls, still had to go to work and pretend everything was fine. But inside he felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made him himself and left just a shell moving through the motions. The girls noticed something was wrong, of course. Kids always do. The older one asked why Daddy was sleeping in the guest room. His wife told her that Daddy wasn't feeling well, that he needed quiet to rest. The lie came easily to her, which somehow made everything worse. At breakfast, they'd sit around the table like they always had, but the silence was different now. Heavy, full of all the things that couldn't be said in front of the children. His wife would try to make conversation, asking him about his day ahead if he wanted her to pick up anything from the store. He'd give short answers, avoiding her eyes. She was trying everything. She showed him her phone multiple times a day, proving there were no new messages from anyone suspicious. She gave him all her passwords to her email, her social media, everything. She said she'd quit yoga, that she'd never go back there again. She left pamphlets for marriage counselors on the kitchen counter, circled phone numbers, highlighted websites. But he wasn't ready for any of that. He was still stuck in the moment when she told him about the kiss, playing it over and over in his mind like a video he couldn't stop watching. Every detail felt important, like if he examined it enough times he'd understand how this had happened to them. At work, he couldn't focus. He'd sit at his desk with blueprints spread out in front of him, but all he could think about was his wife with someone else. Had she dressed up for him? Had she thought about him when she was home with the family? Had she compared them, him and this other man? His business partner noticed something was off, asked if everything was okay at home. He just nodded, said he was tired, working on too many projects at once. The lie felt necessary. He wasn't ready to say the words out loud to anyone else. Saying them would make it more real somehow. 1 week after the confession, he finally asked her the question that had been eating at him. They were alone in the kitchen after putting the girls to bed. She was washing dishes and he was sitting at the table just watching her perform this normal everyday task. Why? He asked. Just that one word. She turned off the water, dried her hands slowly, and came to sit across from him. She'd been waiting for this question, he could tell, maybe even preparing her answer. I don't know, she started, and he felt anger rise in him at such a useless response, but she kept talking. I felt invisible, like I wasn't a person anymore, just a mom and a wife, just someone who does laundry and makes meals and keeps the house running. I couldn't remember the last time someone asked me about my thoughts, my dreams, what I wanted out of life. He started to interrupt, to defend himself, but she held up her hand. I'm not blaming you. I'm really not. I'm trying to explain how I felt, not justify what I did. This man, he asked me questions about books I wanted to read, places I wanted to travel, what I was interested in. He made me feel like I existed as a person, not just as someone's wife or someone's mother. Her words hit him harder than he expected. When was the last time he'd asked her about her dreams? They talked every day, but what did they talk about? Grocery lists, school schedules, bills, repairs needed around the house. Logistics of life, not the substance of it. When did you stop seeing me? She asked quietly. When did I become just the person who keeps your life running smoothly, instead of the person you fell in love with? He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that he still saw her, still loved her. But the truth was uncomfortable. He'd gotten comfortable, complacent. He'd stopped trying because he thought he didn't need to anymore. They were married, they had kids, they had a life together. He thought that was enough. He started remembering things he'd forgotten. Or maybe things he'd just stopped noticing. The art supplies in the closet untouched for years. She used to love painting, spent hours creating these beautiful watercolor landscapes. When had she stopped? And why hadn't he noticed or asked about it? The photography books on her shelf covered in dust. She'd talked about taking a class once years ago. He'd said it sounded nice, but then never brought it up again, never encouraged her to actually do it. The novel stacked on her nightstand, bookmarks stuck in the same places for months. She used to read voraciously, would tell him about the stories, the characters. When had they stopped having those conversations? When had he stopped asking what she was reading? She'd become invisible to him in some way, not on purpose, not maliciously, just through the slow accumulation of days and routine and responsibilities. She was the person who made sure there was milk in the fridge and the girls had clean clothes for school. The person who scheduled dentist appointments and remembered birthday parties. Essential, but somehow also unseen, and he'd become the same to her probably. The person who paid the bills and fixed things that broke and earned money to keep their life running. When had they stopped being people to each other and become just roles, just functions in a well-organized life? The betrayal still hurt. The kiss. The secret conversations, the lying by omission for 3 weeks. That pain was real and valid. But underneath it was another kind of pain, the realization that they'd both been failing each other for a long time, in quieter, less dramatic ways. His anger started to mix with something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding maybe, a recognition that what happened didn't come out of nowhere. It grew from years of small neglects, of taking each other for granted, of assuming their foundation was solid just because it had always been there. Still, understanding didn't erase the hurt. And hurt didn't erase the love. Everything existed at once, tangled up in a complicated mess that he didn't know how to sort through. 2 weeks after everything came out, his wife brought up counseling again, not pushing, just mentioning that she'd found someone who specialized in helping couples work through betrayal, a woman with good reviews, an office not too far from their house. She'd even called and confirmed the therapist had evening appointments so they wouldn't have to take time off work. He wasn't sure he wanted to go. Part of him felt like counseling was admitting defeat, like they couldn't fix their own problems so they needed a stranger to tell them what to do. But another part of him knew they were stuck, going in circles, having the same painful conversations without getting anywhere. For the sake of their daughters, he agreed to try. Just try. That's all he promised. The therapist's office was in a quiet building, the kind of place designed to feel calm and safe. Soft colors, comfortable chairs, tissues on every table. The therapist herself was probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle voice that somehow didn't feel fake or rehearsed. The first session was awkward. Sitting there with his wife, both of them trying to explain to a stranger what their marriage had become. The therapist didn't rush them, just let them talk. Asked occasional questions that seemed simple but somehow got to the heart of things. She asked him what he wanted from the counseling. He didn't have a good answer. He wasn't sure if he wanted to fix the marriage or just understand what went wrong. Maybe both. Maybe neither. She asked his wife the same question. His wife said she wanted to rebuild trust, to become close again, to remember why they'd chosen each other in the first place. Then the therapist said something that surprised him. She said that the kiss wasn't really the problem. It was a symptom of the problem, but not the problem itself. The real issue was that somewhere along the way, they'd stopped being partners and become roommates who happened to have children together. Over the next few weeks, they kept going back. Every Thursday evening, his mother would watch the girls, and they'd drive to the therapist's office in separate cars. Even that felt symbolic somehow. Each of them arriving alone, leaving alone, even though they were supposedly doing this together. The sessions weren't easy. Some weeks felt like they were making progress, having breakthrough conversations that gave him hope. Other weeks felt like they were moving backwards, digging up old resentments and hurts that maybe should have stayed buried. The therapist had them do exercises. One was where they had to each share one thing they missed about the early days of their relationship. His wife said she missed how he used to leave her little notes, funny drawings or sweet messages tucked into her bag or stuck to the bathroom mirror. He'd completely forgotten he used to do that. He said he missed how they used to cook together on Sunday afternoons, trying new recipes, making a mess of the kitchen, laughing when things didn't turn out right. She said she'd stopped suggesting it because he always seemed too busy with work. Another exercise was harder. They had to share what they'd each contributed to the problems in their marriage, without blaming the other person or making excuses. Just honest accountability. His wife talked about how she'd shut down emotionally over the years, stopped communicating when she felt hurt or lonely, let resentments build up instead of addressing them. She admitted that having feelings for someone else was her choice, her responsibility, regardless of what problems existed in their marriage. His turn was harder than he expected. He had to admit that he'd stopped putting in effort once they got married, like he'd won some prize and didn't need to keep competing. He'd stopped dating his wife, stopped trying to impress her or make her feel special. He'd taken her completely for granted, assumed she'd always be there no matter what he did or didn't do. The therapist asked him if he could forgive the kiss. He said he didn't know. Some days he thought maybe he could, that people make mistakes, that their whole history together should count for more than one moment of weakness. Other days the betrayal felt fresh and raw, like it had just happened, and he couldn't imagine ever trusting her again. She asked his wife if she understood the depth of harm she'd caused. His wife nodded, crying like she did in most sessions. She said she replayed that kiss in her head every day, wishing she could take it back, knowing she never could. One evening after therapy, they were both sitting in the driveway after getting home. Neither of them had gotten out of their cars yet. He could see her in his rearview mirror, just sitting there with her hands on the steering wheel. He got out and walked over to her car, tapped on the window. She rolled it down, looking up at him with tired eyes. "Do you still love me?" he asked. It was a question he'd been afraid to ask directly. "Yes," she said immediately. "I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it." Or maybe I forgot that I needed to keep showing it. Do you think about him? He asked, needing to know. No, she said, and he believed her. I think about what I almost lost. I think about how stupid I was. I think about you and the girls and how I could have destroyed everything over nothing real. He nodded and walked back to his car, but it felt like something had shifted. Just slightly. His mother had noticed the tension, of course. She'd asked him several times if everything was okay. Finally, one evening when she was over for dinner after the girls had gone to play in their room, he told her. He told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something he didn't expect. She told him about his father, who'd passed away 5 years earlier. She said that marriage was long and everybody messes up at some point. Different mistakes, different ways, but everybody hurts each other eventually. The question wasn't whether someone would fail you, but whether you both wanted to do the work to recover from it. His best friend had different advice. He said once trust is broken, it's broken forever. That he'd never be able to fully believe her again. That he'd always wonder, always doubt. That he deserved better than to spend his life as a prison guard, checking phones and asking questions. Both perspectives made sense. Both felt true in different moments. 3 months after the confession, something unexpected happened. He came home from work and heard laughter from the kitchen. Real laughter, the kind they hadn't had in their house for a long time. His wife and the girls were baking cookies, flour everywhere, chocolate chips scattered across the counter. The younger one had dough on her nose. His wife looked up when he walked in, and for just a second she looked like the girl he'd fallen in love with in college. Not because she looked younger or different, but because there was light in her eyes, a happiness that came from this moment right here. Right now, we're making a mess, she said, almost apologetically. I can see that, he replied, and found himself smiling despite everything. That night, after the girls were in bed and the kitchen was cleaned, they sat together on the couch, not touching but closer than they'd been in weeks. They were watching some show neither of them was really paying attention to. I signed up for that photography class, she said suddenly, the one at the community center on Saturday mornings. Your mom said she'd watch the girls. That's good, he said, and meant it. I want to be a person again, she continued. Not just because of what happened, but because I need to be. For me, but also for you and the girls. I can't be a good partner or mother if I've lost myself. He understood that now in a way he hadn't before. He'd been thinking about it too. About how he'd let work consume him. How he'd stopped having hobbies or interests outside of his career and family. How he'd become one-dimensional. The forgiveness didn't come all at once. It wasn't like in movies where someone gives a speech and everything is suddenly okay. It was smaller than that and slower. It came in pieces, in moments. It came when she made his coffee exactly how he liked it. The way she'd done every morning for years. And he realized she'd never stopped doing these small acts of care, even when things were terrible. It came when he found himself laughing at something she said, a genuine laugh, and realized he'd missed her sense of humor. It came when he watched her with their daughters. So patient and loving, and remembered that she was a good person who'd made a bad choice. Not a bad person who'd shown her true colors, but it also came with setbacks. Days when he'd see her on her phone and feel his chest tighten with anxiety. Nights when he'd wake up and reach for her, then remember and pull back. Moments when the hurt would wash over him fresh and new, like no time had passed at all. He started his own therapy, individual sessions, because he realized he needed to process his own feelings separate from trying to fix the marriage. His therapist helped him understand that healing wasn't linear, that having bad days didn't mean he was failing, that learning to trust again would take time. They started doing date nights. Not fancy dinners, but simple things. Walks around their neighborhood after the girls were asleep. His mother staying at the house in case they woke up. Coffee on Saturday mornings at a small place downtown. A movie on a weeknight, sneaking out like teenagers. During these dates, they talked. Really talked. Not about schedules or kids or house repairs, but about ideas, memories, dreams, fears. Getting to know each other again. Or maybe for the first time in years. He told her about a project at work that excited him. A community center he was designing that would serve underprivileged kids. She told him about the photography class, how she'd forgotten how much she loved capturing moments, seeing the world through a lens. They talked about their daughters, not just logistics, but really talked about them. The older one's sensitivity, how she felt things deeply and needed reassurance, the younger one's boldness, how she threw herself into everything without fear. They talked about what kind of parents they wanted to be, what values they wanted to pass on. Slowly, carefully, they started touching again. A hand on a shoulder while passing in the kitchen, sitting close on the couch. Eventually, holding hands during their walks. Each touch felt significant, a small brick in rebuilding what had been broken. Their anniversary came around again. A year since the confession. He'd thought about this date for months, wondering how it would feel, what they should do. He gave her the pearl necklace, the same one he'd bought last year, still in its box, hidden in his drawer for 12 months. She cried when she opened it. "You kept it?" "I kept it," he said. "I wasn't sure we'd get here, but I hoped we would." She put it on and they went to dinner. Not to the fancy restaurant he'd originally planned, but to the diner where they'd had their first date all those years ago. Cheap food, worn booths, but it felt right. Over burgers and fries, they talked about the year that had passed. The worst year of their marriage, but also maybe the most important. The year that forced them to look at everything they'd been ignoring, to do the hard work of actually seeing each other again. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not for the first time." "I'm sorry too," he replied, and meant it. Sorry for his part in what had gone wrong, for the years of benign neglect, for assuming love alone was enough without the daily work of nurturing it. They weren't perfect. The scars were still there, would always be there. He still had moments of doubt, still occasionally wondered if he'd made the right choice in staying. She still carried guilt, still sometimes looked at him with uncertainty like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But they were trying. Really trying, choosing each other, not just once, but every day, making the effort to stay present, to communicate, to remember that marriage was a living thing that needed tending. The girls were happier. They could feel the change in the house, the way the tension had lifted, how their parents smiled more, laughed more, seemed lighter somehow. Late at night, lying in their bed together again, he'd sometimes think about that phrase she'd used when she first told him, "Just a kiss." It had felt so minimizing then, like she was trying to make something devastating seem small. But he understood now that it was never about the kiss. The kiss was just the visible crack in a foundation that had been slowly weakening for years. The kiss was a wake-up call, a brutal and painful way of forcing them to look at what their marriage had become and decide if they wanted to fight for something better. They'd chosen to fight. Some days that fight was harder than others. Some days he wondered if they were fooling themselves, trying to resurrect something that had already died. But most days he felt grateful. Grateful for the second chance. Grateful for the hard lessons. Grateful that sometimes breaking is what forces you to rebuild stronger. He'd learned that betrayal came in many forms. The obvious kind, like a kiss that shouldn't have happened, but also the quiet kind, the daily choice to stop seeing your partner as a whole person, to let routine replace romance, to take for granted the person who's always there. And he'd learned that forgiveness wasn't weakness. It wasn't letting someone off the hook or pretending nothing happened. It was choosing to move forward while acknowledging the past, carrying the scars but not letting them define everything that came after. Their story wasn't neat or simple. It wasn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It was messy and complicated and real. Two imperfect people who'd hurt each other, learning slowly and painfully how to do better, how to be better, how to choose love even when it was hard. And that, he was learning, was what marriage actually was. Not perfection, but persistence. Not never falling, but getting back up together.